Before we turn the page to the college football playoff, early signing day, transfer portal, and everything else that is to come in these next few weeks, it is time for some final thoughts on Notre Dame's win over USC. How were the Irish able to knock off the Trojans and book their spot in the college football playoff by using a much different formula than the one we all anticipated? This is Locked On Irish.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? And welcome into Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. My name is Tyler Wojciak, and I'm the host. I graduated from Notre Dame in 2018, and now I'm a producer at Fox Sports, and it is great to have you here on this Tuesday, December 3rd, and thanks as always for making this your first listen of the day. Before we get rolling, I would really appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button if you are watching on YouTube or wherever you are listening to the podcast. And today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Tuesday means we've got Luke Smith on the show today, and he's going to join me here in just a second to do what we always do during the regular season. We're going to break down the three things that we liked and didn't like from the game on Saturday, and then we're going to look ahead to the penultimate CFP rankings, which come out later tonight. Notre Dame's spot in the playoff is secure, and they're going to host a game in that first round, but there are a lot more dominoes to fall during conference championship weekend that's coming up, and that will ultimately decide Notre Dame's path in the 12-team playoff. Let's bring in Luke. All right, it's always great to have Luke Smith on, but especially in the aftermath of a win over USC, and even more so now that the Irish were able to secure a spot in the college football playoff. So, Luke, you could take this any direction you want. There are so many different things that we can talk about here, but what is the biggest headline to you coming out of this game?
So I'll be very eager, since we had a bit of a role reversal, to hear about the in-stadium experience. But I think to me, the biggest takeaway is this season, it almost felt like, at least to me at times, like we weren't allowed to enjoy it, or it was like hard to enjoy it because of what happened, I guess, what is now 86 days ago. Marcus Truman kept saying 84 days ago on Saturday. But now that Notre Dame has finally done the darn thing, won 10 in a row and clinched the playoff spot, we can start to enjoy this, and we can start to think a little bit more about what this team can possibly do, and do that earnestly, because that team earned it by ripping off 10 straight wins after the most inexplicable loss, and they look pretty darn good doing it on Saturday too.
They did, and there was a moment during that game, especially in the fourth quarter, Notre Dame has that 2-touchdown lead, and it's like, all right, they're so close to finally pulling this off, because there's just been so many weeks, especially in the early aftermath of the NIU loss, where it seemed like anytime you said anything positive about the team, even Notre Dame fans were like reluctant to embrace this team in the season at all. And I understand, because that loss was so bad. But like, at what point for you did you finally allow yourself to enjoy this season? Because I think everyone kind of operated on a different timeline this year. I feel like I was a little bit more optimistic than most early on, which is certainly not normal for me. But I feel like after that game against Stanford, which seems kind of weird because Stanford is terrible this year, but like that was a big moment for me because it was coming off the bye. Yeah. The offense looked really good. And I was like, you know what? This season might not be over. But when was that moment for you?
Yeah, I think it was a similar timeline, just because the offense looked a lot better that day, as well as maybe the Navy game too, just because it was so dominant. But I think that's when I started to allow myself to think, all right, they might actually win the rest of these games. But like, truthfully, like, I don't know that I've allowed myself to enjoy this until the clock hit 0 on Saturday. And like, it was kind of funny, like as I was sitting there watching that game, like I didn't find myself moved as much as I thought I normally would be, just because it's like this feels like this shouldn't happen because of what happened on September 7th, to be totally honest with you. So I think it took some time to soak in and realize, all right, they're in this 12-team playoff now in 99% likelihood, and they, I think, have a real chance to make a run. But it's been hard to let myself get there, because normally when something that catastrophic happens, like just, lightning does strike twice.
I mean, I certainly expected that. I'm the moron who started off a show by saying, well, the season's over after week 2. But in the moment, it felt that way. And for a while, I still felt like that loss was coming. Honestly, it might have been after the Navy game when I was finally like, okay, now they should finish 11-1 because there was a point where I thought the Navy game could trip them up. That certainly did not happen. They won that game 51-14. But we've come a long way since that week 2 loss. And I could tell you from my vantage point inside the stadium, like when the game started, it was pretty empty. 12:30 game. I'm sitting directly in the sun. It was a gorgeous day. It was like 75 degrees, but sun was just beating down on us, and the crowd was pretty empty at the start. And you've been there before. You know how they just sort of tucked Notre Dame.
Right.
That whole section is in that corner that's basically like a mile away from the stadium. So that part was full, and you could see green scattered around the stadium. But then as the game went on, I think more USC fans were filing in, but it was still kind of like a Notre Dame dominant crowd. But then as USC was driving the ball, down a touchdown, it's 35-28. It looks like they're going in to score, and now you're starting to think, okay, is Notre Dame going to get the ball back tied? Is USC going to be willing to go for 2? Tensions were high. A big "Let's Go Trojans" chant started throughout the crowd. It was definitely the most pressure-packed moment of the game, and then Christian Gray, who could not catch an interception all year, makes that one-handed play, returns it all the way for a touchdown. I saw the flag, so I never even accepted during that it was going to be a touchdown, but the relief that I felt in that moment probably was a stronger emotion than joy or anything like that, because it was very stressful, but it felt like 10 straight weeks of stress just finally letting go and being able to enjoy that moment. I'm sure a lot of other people felt the same way.
Yeah, well, I would agree with you because that was a moment where I did find myself getting moved, especially because my thought process was USC is going to go down and then go for 2 and take the lead here. That was what I thought they were going to do. And on that Christian Gray play, because I see him covering him, he's kind of got his hand on him. And on the TV copy, what you see is you see the ref like reach into his belt buckle. And I'm like, oh no. But then I did see him drop the marker there. So it was not a flag. I'm like, okay. And then as he's like at the 50-yard line, I see a flag. I'm like, what could that possibly be? And thankfully the TV we're on, I guess, was behind because somebody at the game told us touchdown stands. And pretty funny, Jade Mayava gets a chop block on a pick 6 he throws. But that was one of those times where when I saw him reach into his belt buckle, I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. And thankfully it was just a marker, not a flag.
Watching him go down the sideline and the whole team just running there right with him, and especially considering the game that Christian Gray had prior to that moment, can't even imagine what was going through his head. The video that came out, Notre Dame's all-access video, Christian Gray just said he had to scream at himself before the drive. Hey, man, whatever works. If he has to scream at himself every drive from here on out, then I'm certainly okay with that. But then what were you doing during Xavier Watts' interception return for a touchdown? Because I just started laughing in that moment. I was like, wow. Oh, this is so perfect, too, because it's X.
Well, again, being delayed there helped because it's 4th down. Our buddy Pat Falkenberg goes to me. They must do something really stupid here because Tommy, his brother who's at the game, just texted me 8 ha-has in a row. And like a second later, we see a pick in the end zone and he's going down the sideline. And yeah, that pretty much summed it up.
Yeah, that's definitely the funniest part for me because it's like the Gray one, there's real stakes at that moment. At this point, the game's basically over. Notre Dame is already up 14. And even though technically USC was still in it, just the way that played out was so perfect. And you know what? That actually leads me into the 3 things that I liked. My first one, I'm going to say Xavier Watts, because like what more can you say about him and what he's done for the team this season and over the course of the past 2 seasons? Finishes off the regular season with a 9-tackle game. He had a great pass breakup to shut the door on a USC possession when they were driving. And then he has the 103-yard interception return for a touchdown. But he now has 2 all-time great performances in this rivalry, and he did it in back-to-back seasons. USC got to see him up close and personal the whole time that he returned that touchdown. He's looking him down the entire single way, and I'm sure that they are going to be very happy to never have to deal with him again.
Yeah, I think they will be, and I was a little upset that in the video Notre Dame put out today there was nothing from that play in it. Maybe that just means that nothing allowable was said during that.
And that's kind of the vibe that I got. They're like, we can't share this with people because either the mic'd up, I don't think he was mic'd up, but still just people might not.
Notre Dame social media department, if you've got a copy of that, I'd like to see it. But
as would I.
Anyways, yeah, another tremendous game from him. Truly a Trojan killer. And it's funny because 2 years ago, we were out at the USC game in Los Angeles and One, he dropped a pick, actually, that could have been a huge play in that game. But more importantly, there was a kid at the bar after the game who told us he was like Xavier Watts' best friend from home. And his proof of that was showing us about 65 Snapchats sent to him that were not opened. And wherever that guy was Saturday night, man, I just hope you enjoyed your best buddy having the game of his life once again.
You talk about a guy who is incapable of reading a room. I have never met anyone that suffered more like that. The vibes were so down. We were so just not in a great talking mood.
Probably shouldn't have been in public, to be honest.
No, this guy comes over. He's hammered. He's trying to talk to us, and he's bragging about the Xavier Watts thing. And we're like, first of all, dude, you're lying. Second of all, just now's not the time.
Yeah.
But hey, much better spirits after this one.
I would imagine. Yeah, no, definitely had to be a good one. And for me, as we're talking about things that made me smile, I got to start with the run game here. I think it's fair to say that Saturday was a bit of a coming out party nationally for Jeremiah Love, just based on some of the conversation I heard from different podcasts, different writers across the country. And the unfortunate part about that is he only got to play a little over a half. He finished with 99 yards on 13 carries for the touchdown and had 3 catches for 38 yards. And a hurdle that probably gained him 15 yards alone. I'm just going to leave it at this. He is the best running back in the country. I don't want to hear about Ashton Genty. He's better than him. And he gives Notre Dame a fighting chance against anybody if he's healthy come January.
What Jeremiah Love did in this game was special, and really what he's done all season long. He sets the record, scored a touchdown in every single game this season. I loved his Instagram post where he's like 3 certainties in life, death, taxes, and a Jeremiah Love touchdown. That's true, because even in the one game where he wasn't really that great this season, I think it was Florida State, he still got a touchdown in that game as well. But it wasn't just him. Jadarian Price had a great game, and Riley Leonard added 50 rushing yards as well. Like, when those 3 guys are clicking, I don't think that there is a better rushing attack in the entire country.
I agree. And Price has gotten better and better each game. He had a career high 111 yards in that game. They needed every yard of that in the second half. And I know there were maybe a couple drives where it did seem like the offense bogged down, but I kind of felt that entire game like USC was never going to stop them. It just seemed like the offense couldn't be stopped at different points during the game. And a lot of that came on the ground. And a lot of that was due to the offensive line, which was tremendous. But specifically, I want to call out Emil Wagner. He was the highest graded offensive player, didn't allow a pressure, highest graded run and pass blocker. And I'd argue he's probably been the most reliable of the offensive line all season. And Saturday was no different. So shout out to him for another tremendous game.
Yeah, he was excellent in that one. I also thought Anthony Knapp, I mean, he's been getting better every single week, but also had a really good game in that one as well. But you think about where Notre Dame was coming out of the half, 14-14. They get the ball first. Jeremiah Love run for 10 yards. Then they have an incomplete pass. Love is a 6-yard run. And then Leonard completes a nice pass to Chris Mitchell. Love run, and then Jadarian Price touchdown run. Like 6 plays, 75 yards in a moment that they absolutely needed it, and they leaned on their offensive line and running game the whole way. That has really been the one consistent thing they've had in offense all season long. But like, you think about how they've had to lean on their defense in so many games and so many moments this year. It was great to see the offense come out and make a statement right away on a possession where they absolutely had to have it.
Yeah, and who would have thought that we would have been able to say that about the offensive line at the start of the year? Like, it's funny, too, back to that kind of national perspective I was talking about. Like, you hear people talking about how good Notre Dame's offensive line is, and I guess they're not wrong, but, like, by Notre Dame standards, this is not the most, maybe not, I don't want to say it's not the most talented group, because it's very possible this is a very talented group, but it's far from the most experienced group. And what they've been able to put together, particularly with a passing game that hasn't been exceptional at times, it's been really impressive.
Yeah, that's actually the next thing that I liked in this show. We've already talked about it a little bit, the offensive line, but I also thought they were pretty effective in pass protection as well. According to Pro Football Focus, Riley Leonard was only under pressure on 6 of 28 dropbacks. And USC was able to get home a couple times. They got a couple sacks, so part of that is on Leonard. I just thought they played a really complete game. They were stout in the run game. Love, Price, and Leonard combined for 124 rushing yards before contact, which is a testament to the holes generated by the offensive line. If they're getting that amount of yards without being touched, that means that maybe you or I could pick up some yards in that kind of game. And the fact that this group went from being a potential liability at the start of the year, that's all we talked about going into that game against Texas A&M. That's all anyone ever talked about, to go from that performance where they actually held their own, and now they're a legitimate strength on the team, despite the fact that they lost Ashton Craig at center and Charles Jagusah at left tackle before the season. Like, it's so impressive. We've talked about it before. Can't say enough good things about Joe Rudolph, but credit to those guys for figuring it out, no matter who's out there, and coming up big in the biggest moment of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. And related, speaking of whoever's out there coming up big in the biggest moment of the season, Leonard Moore. Prior to that end of game touchdown, USC was 1-9 throwing on him for 19 yards. He had 5 pass breakups. It reached a point where I was audibly wondered, why are they throwing at him, particularly with what was going on the other side with Christian Gray. But he is a budding star, and I think he's going to be Notre Dame's number 1 corner next year. And that's no shade on Christian Gray. I just think he's that good. He's got a unique length, and he's exactly what I suggested a few weeks ago, where I said, what if he's just end of freshman year Benjamin Morrison? It's kind of looking that way right now.
The fact he did that against USC's receivers was even more impressive. And also, it wasn't just Christian Gray who was struggling too. Adon Schuler didn't have a great game. Jordan Clark got beat on a few plays. And even though Adon Schuler is only a redshirt freshman, Jordan Clark is a fifth-year senior. He's been around. He's been really productive for the Irish this season. And that means like USC was beating Notre Dame's veterans, but the one guy that they could count on the most, at least at quarterback, was a true freshman, Leonard Moore. And if this is his freshman season, it's scary to think about how good he could be next year or even the year after that.
Yeah, it really is. And I just, it's one of those things where prior to the year, it's a name that like nobody even really knows, and now you look at him and he's one of their most valuable players out there, and they're going to need him to do similar things in the playoffs. But I think this was a heck of a test going into it, and he passed with flying colors.
Also, it reminds me of when Benjamin Morrison said during fall camp that Leonard Moore was going to have a better career at Notre Dame than he did. And I remember rolling my eyes at that. I'm like, I understand wanting to give high praise. That is an extreme thing to say after, I think it had only been like 1 week of practice. Right. I'm not even sure if they were in full pads, but what was once considered to be a crazy thought, now I'm not ready to say that like, oh, that's going to happen just yet, but it's something that we have to at least entertain, and that's a really good place for Notre Dame to be with that defensive back room.
Yeah, it is. And I'm really excited to see how they play in the postseason against potentially some better receiving outfits out there. I'm not sure how many better receiving outfits they're going to face, but probably better than what they've been seeing to the USC game, and that's why this was such an important test that they passed.
Yeah, not everyone passed the test. I don't think the Notre Dame wide receivers really had a great game, but the tight ends stepped up in their place. And it was really good because we've kind of been waiting for that all season long. Like, we all thought that Mitchell Evans would have a really great year, and then guys like Eli Raridan and Cooper Flanagan would really emerge on the scene, and that just hasn't really come together yet. But this was the type of production that we've been waiting to see. Mitchell Evans finished with 5 catches, 59 yards, and that really nice 23-yard touchdown reception. Eli Raridan only had 2 catches for 16 yards, but he had a nice touchdown as well. Notre Dame still has issues winning one-on-one battles in the outside, particularly with their wide receivers. But when you have guys as talented as Mitchell Evans, as Eli Raridan, like that creates matchup problems for the defense. And in both of those touchdown plays, Notre Dame just had a matchup, first with Eli Raridan, then Mitchell Evans. They were able to capitalize it, and that led to huge 2 touchdowns in this game. And they're going to need these guys in the playoff because it's not just Mitchell Evans. You look at his snap count, he's really not playing all that much. I also think that Cooper Flanagan has one more big catch in him before this season ends. So it's really encouraging that these guys are healthy and stepping up this late in the season.
It is, because I know you've been calling it for all year long, and to finally see it in moments where they really needed it, that was huge. And I'm sure there are going to be other mismatches that they can get those guys into in the postseason, and they need to take advantage of those. And especially with Eli Raridan, like, you saw some of those close-ups of him. Like, he's just a massive guy. It's shocking how big he is. He kind of looks like Hercules out there, to be honest. And if they can get more utility out of him, that's going to be a big deal.
And that one play that they scored on was like the perfect Eli Raridan play. He's in the slot. He's got a safety on him that's an immediate mismatch. And it's not just his size. Like, he cooked a dude off the line of scrimmage, and he was wide open there for a touchdown. So great route, great execution by the Notre Dame offense.
Absolutely. And Mitchell Evans also connected with Tyler Buchner at one point. And that is the last thing I want to touch on. Just what a moment for Tyler Buchner coming off the bench, just doing the signals to deliver a strike to Mitchell Evans for 23 yards and a first down on a fake punt. I don't know how USC doesn't sniff that out. I don't know how any of these teams haven't. Teams must just not look at the personnel who's out there. That's the only thing I can think of, and maybe you're distracted by other things. We know Lincoln Riley, though he does have a special teams coach now, has not always been the most dedicated towards that third of the ball game. But what a moment for him! And honestly, one of given his past as a passer, not a given necessarily as a throw. So I'm glad he hit it.
I'm so glad that he connected on that pass.
Yeah.
Not only because Notre Dame got to first down, but for his own sake. He just would have been the subject of a lot of criticism, most of which would be unfair in that circumstance. But I remember thinking when Notre Dame ran out there, they usually go in different formations, but they ran a weird one. I'm like, this kind of feels like a fake. But then I looked at where they're at. I'm like, man, they're on their own 26. Are they really going to fake it right now, this early on in the game? And then once Buchner comes in motion and I see him with no gloves on, it's like, oh, yeah, it's a fake. And then you could just tell, his throwing motion, Buchner has a very distinct throwing motion. And I'm like, oh, my God, that's Buchner. But from my view, I could not tell that Mitchell Evans was as open as he looked because I'm seeing a lot of red in between. So I thought it might be picked, and I was thinking, oh, this is going to be bad. But then you watch a TV copy and you realize, he was wide open the whole time. Before Luke and I break down everything we didn't like from this game, including more kicking woes, I want to take this opportunity to tell you about Gametime. Whether it be sports, concerts, comedy shows, you name it, I love going to live events. And Gametime has this great new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And there are so many great sporting events going on right now. College football is winding down, but the NFL is in full swing, and the NBA and NHL are going strong during the early portion of their season. So get off your couch and get in the game with Gametime. My favorite thing about the app, though, is you get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, and then you can buy tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. What time is it? Game time.
Unfortunately, that fake punt went all for naught because the kicking game. And I'm tired of talking about this, but you can't not talk about it in the context of this game, because if Mitch Jeter hits a chip shot, I don't think USC hangs around for as long as they are. I think being down 10 that, they might go away. But anyways, it's just legitimately shocking how in his head Mitch Jeter is, especially for a guy who kicked in the SEC for 4 years. If you had told me this happened to Blake Grupe 2 years ago, I think I would have believed that. Coming from Arkansas State, he's 4'6", and somehow, credit to him, he's still hanging around the NFL, although he's not very good. But if you had told me that happened to him, I would have been like, okay. But Jeter, it does feel like it's just a mental thing now and not physical. I know I heard John Bryce from Football Scoop mention that Josh Bryan is still on campus. Can we get him back?
I had no idea that Josh Bryan was still on campus until I heard that from Bryce. That was shocking news to me.
Yeah, which I kind of remembered that he just left the team, but I thought that he went somewhere else. He did not. So that might be worth a call.
The thing is, I'm sure that the coaching staff is looking at all the different options, and they still think Mitch Jeter is the best. And when Notre Dame came out for warmups in the second half, I was watching the kickers, and he looks good when he's kicking it. It's totally a mental thing at this point when he gets in the game. And it's not just him, too. I would say that the field goal operation as a whole this year has struggled. There's a bad snap. I think it was Miami, and they benched the snapper. They're letting guys through that lead to blocked kicks. So it's not all on Mitch Jeter. And I feel like throughout the season I've been defending him. I'm like, look, he's hurt. This is a really difficult thing to get over. If you're a kicker, hip, groin injuries, they nag. And now it's just at the point where I'm like, you got to probably go elsewhere, because I just don't think that the mental block is something that he's going to be able to get over between now and the first playoff game. He can't kick a basically an extra point in 75 and sunny weather in Los Angeles, but we're supposed to expect him to knock down a field goal in potentially snowy conditions in the college football playoff in a few weeks from now. I just don't see it happening, but it's not like all the alternatives are that great either. So this is just a really, really bad spot for Notre Dame to be in, and it hasn't burned them yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if it does in the near future.
Yeah, no doubt. And I can't say it's got to get cleaned up because I don't have any faith that it will, but that's just sort of where I'm at.
Now that we're already on the kicking thing, let's just continue with the things we didn't like in this one. For me, the turnovers really stand out, and Marcus Freeman mentioned it in his post-game press conference. The only time Notre Dame lost this season, a big reason why, is because they lost the turnover battle to Northern Illinois. Riley Leonard threw that god-awful interception to basically end the game. Northern Illinois gets the ball, kick the game-winning field goal. But Notre Dame was losing the turnover battle again until the very end in this one. And, the interception, I still don't 100% know what happened there with Riley Leonard and Chris Mitchell, the miscommunication that happened on that play. But then you got a guy like Jane Thomas, who is a veteran and has been an unsung hero for this team for what he's been able to do as a blocker. He can't afford to fumble the ball like that, especially just straight up in the air. I would have been interested to see if that had just gone down. Would that have been ruled a fumble or an incomplete pass? Either way, USC caught the ball in the air. And those are two bad turnovers that kept USC in the game, and that cannot happen going forward. So definitely something that Notre Dame needs to clean up here.
Yeah, and it was uncharacteristic. We haven't really seen that a lot from this team this year. The Leonard pick, yeah, I mean, you're right. It looked like the NIU one. I don't know what the heck happened there. The Thomas one, I'm going to give him a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. That just seemed like a complete fluke thing, to be honest. He caught the ball, and it was right as he turned that a guy just happened to punch it out, and that's sort of what happened. Like, I think 99 out of 100 times that's not happening. I don't think that'll happen again for him, and it's unfortunate because he had just had a catch prior to that, and I think that on a day where Notre Dame's receivers had struggled, he might have been a guy that they could have gone to if that didn't happen, because he's a guy we've seen had success against USC in the past. But I trust him not to do that moving forward. The Leonard thing, I don't know what that was, but I never want to see it again.
Yeah. But what do you got next on the things you don't like?
This is more so just like overreactions to the defensive performance. I was really annoyed by some of the overreaction I saw to how the defense played on Saturday. There seemed to be this fear like USC has uncovered some hole in Al Golden's defense. No, Notre Dame was playing the defense it always does, which leaves its corners susceptible to one-on-one balls and leaves them especially susceptible when Christian Gray kind of just loses a bit of his confidence for 2.5 quarters. I think you also have to give Jaden Mayava some credit. He made some really good throws, and their receivers made some really tough catches. I would fully expect this Notre Dame defense to again be dominant with Howard Cross back in the playoff, and the secondary should be as confident as ever with how they closed out Saturday's game. So just like from a fan base perspective, I thought some of that was so unnecessary, and like I don't know, it just seemed like a bit much to me, some of the reaction I saw.
There were so many times too where USC players just made plays. Right. They made some really difficult catches, especially on the sideline. And yeah, Christian Gray, I don't expect him to have another performance like that. Notre Dame is going to get Howard Cross back soon. I think that's going to help with the pass rush because it felt like Notre Dame was getting pressure in this game. They just were not getting home. Like Gabriel Rubio had the only sack. Part of that, credit to Jane Mayava for avoiding the pressure. But yeah, I mean, look, they played a good offense with one of the best play callers of our generation. They were able to put up points. They scored 35. One of those was a garbage time touchdown. They got those 2 turnovers late. It's just like the expectation for this defense has been set almost to an impossibly high standard that if they don't live up to that and they look like a normal defense, then everyone freaks out.
Yeah, and now the other thing I think also from like a box score watcher perspective, as I'll call them, because I've heard multiple people like USC put up a lot of yards. Like if you look at how that game flowed, through 47 minutes when Notre Dame was up 35-21, SC had a 45% success rate. And then they ran 24 plays for 249 yards to close it out, including the last drive, which went 5 plays and 75 yards, including like 67 on the ground as time went under a minute. That doesn't count. Now, granted, I think that first drive where, USC was going into tie, obviously like those 70 yards, that was not great. But the next 2 drives after that, which is, I think, 140, 150 yards worth of offense, like that's just not as big of a deal to me. It really isn't.
Yeah, Notre Dame should probably not run a whole lot of prevent because the one drive to me that I was like, wow, I did not like that from the Notre Dame defense was the drive right before the end of the first half. Now, part of that was set up by a Christian Gray pass interference penalty, but Mekhi Lemon had like a 35-yard catch. They just made that drive look so easy. I think they got the ball back with like 55 seconds left on the clock. That was the first time we had seen anyone drive down the field on the Notre Dame defense like that in a spot where the game was still in doubt. So that drive, I'm like, okay, that was ugly. But yeah, you're right. The drives at the end, that kind of felt like stat padding.
Yeah, and here's the thing. Like, I know USC went 6-6, but there's not a ton of teams in this country outside of Ohio State, and they don't even necessarily always use their receivers. But with receivers who truly scare you, like you watch that Georgia game on Friday night, do any of those guys scare you? They don't scare me.
No, they drop the ball all the time.
Yeah.
Even more than Notre Dame's wide receivers.
Yeah.
They throw the ball a little bit more. All right, next thing for me is the Riley Mills punch. And if you haven't seen it, there's this video that's been going around on social media since the game happened where there's a USC player who is pulling on Riley Mills' leg when Jaden Mayava was going in to score the 1-yard touchdown run. There's a big scrum. And to be clear, I recognize that that was a dirty play by the USC player. I'm not defending him at all. I understand why Riley Mills would be pissed about that and would want to retaliate. But that was a dumb move by Riley Mills. He's lucky the ref didn't see it because if he did, he absolutely would have been ejected. This wasn't even like a shove in the face. No, this was a clear, cocked his arm back, punched him directly in the face mask, and you cannot do that in that situation. It was still very early on in the second quarter. Notre Dame was already without Howard Cross, and if Mills got tossed, they would have been down to Donovan Heinisch, Gabriel Rubio, and who else at defensive tackle? Like Sean Sevillano. Like, you're going to put a true freshman in there in that circumstance. And again, I want to make this abundantly clear. I understand why Riley Mills was pissed, but as a fifth-year senior, you have to be able to keep your emotions in check in that situation and turn around and not clock the guy in the face, because it's always the people who retaliate in those situations. They end up dealing with the harshest punishment, and Notre Dame got lucky there that it wasn't Riley Mills, because if they were without Mills and Cross, that would have been really tough sledding for the Notre Dame defense.
Yeah, and like, let's be honest, it's stupid to punch a guy in the helmet. Like, what are you accomplishing?
Yeah, it's going to hurt your hand more. He hit him right in the face mask.
Yeah. Honestly, I think he's lucky he doesn't get suspended. And I don't think he will, but like I 100% my first thought was he's going to get suspended when they didn't see that. So it sounds like maybe that won't happen, but like it'd be hard to argue with it either. So he's probably going to play, but that was really stupid.
Nobody asked Marcus Freeman about it after the game, correct?
I mean, I hope that's just the Notre Dame media being biased and not wanting to draw more attention to this, because I didn't like the fact that I saw some of the players post that video, which was just stupid to me too. But, whatever.
That's dumb. It was all very stupid. And again, it could have been really bad, because if the ref saw it live, he's gone. That's an automatic ejection. You can't punch a dude in the face, especially a guy on the ground, even though it was a dirty play by him. You just cannot let that happen. Notre Dame got away with one.
They did. Now, that is not to say that I think there was a lot of bad stuff flowing out there on Saturday.
Oh, it was very chippy, a lot of trash talk.
It's probably, honestly, I'd be willing to have a broader conversation about college football, but Mekhi Lemon, what are you doing, dude? He played well on Saturday, but he was talking an awful lot for a guy on a 6-6 football team. And he kept motioning first down like a gun when he's down 14 with a handful of minutes left. Like, just shut up. I don't know what your deal is, but it was annoying. And I could not stand looking at him on the television broadcast.
Unfortunately, Mekhi Lemon was going off. He was definitely the player of the game for the USC offense, and Notre Dame did not really have an answer for him. What did he finish with? 9 catches? 133 yards. Yeah, no touchdowns. But I'm telling you, man, you could see it from the crowd. There was a lot of chippiness in this one. Now it's a rivalry game, and you compare it to some of the other things that went down across college football this past Saturday. It was actually one of the more tame games because Notre Dame was not planting the flag on the field or anything like that. But yeah, I understand your frustrations with Mekhi Lemon. I was more frustrated with the fact that Notre Dame couldn't seem to stop him, but glad that they were able to get the win on that field.
I mean, he was talking on punt coverage and stuff too. It's like, dude, just shut up. By the way, quick aside, like, flag planting might be the dumbest thing ever. What are we doing?
Into turf?
That was a thing. I remember this in 2005 with Michigan State and Notre Dame, and those idiots at Michigan State planted the flag at the 35-yard line instead of the 50. But why is this all of a sudden a thing again now? Like, obviously Baker Mayfield did it 7-8 years ago, but it's lame. Like, nobody, like, what are you doing taking the flag from the band and just putting it on the ground? I just think it's stupid. I really do. And I don't understand why it's causing so much animosity. I honestly think that Ohio State-Michigan rivalry, like, they honestly need to do some serious self-reflection on both sides there. That is just like, that is becoming something it shouldn't be. And it's really what it is like when in Friday Night Lights, they're putting like for sale signs in the coaches' yards in real life. Like, those people need help.
It's crazy. It does kind of have the feel of like a high school rivalry where there's just so much hate and animosity.
For no reason.
I think Ohio State,
it's stupid.
They do it to themselves too with like, crossing out all the M's and only calling them the team up north. When you lose 4 in a row, you don't really have that much ground to stand on. I could not believe how bad Ohio State was in that game. But then after that, to your point about the flag planting, it seemed like every other rivalry game across college football, like they all watched that and were like, we need to replicate this, which is the exact wrong reaction you should have had from watching that whole thing go down in between Michigan and Ohio State.
Yeah, I just don't get it. I think like there's probably cooler ways to like show we took over your stadium than putting a freaking flag down in the ground. But anyways.
Especially a turf field.
Yeah.
The flag cannot go in. Although, who was it? Was it Arizona State? They did get it in the field because they had a fork. It was not a flag. And they could actually stab that turf field with the fork. Okay, one quick thing that I didn't like from this game, just have to throw it out there because I've had a couple of people ask me about this today. The Jeremiah Love injury. Last thing I didn't like. Incredibly unfortunate one because it felt like he was on his way to putting up a big game on the stat sheet. But this is probably going to be a talking point over the course of these next few weeks. There have been conflicting reports out there about the severity of this knee injury. Some people are already saying it's minor. He's going to be 100% ready to go. Then you've got some other reports saying that maybe it's a little bit more serious, not saying that it's like a tear or anything like that, but that he could miss the playoff game. I don't know. And as a matter of fact, I don't think we're going to know whether or not he's healthy until the game starts and Notre Dame's offense runs out there on the field, because we know how coy Marcus Freeman is about injuries. And if he's not hurt, there's really no incentive for him to say that. It's just an interesting situation here with Jeremiah Love. Obviously, it's a massive deal, and Notre Dame needs him to be fully healthy to be ready to go in the college football playoff. But it's just sort of like, we're at the point now with these injuries where it's like, man, another one, and now it's to the team's best player.
Yeah, I mean, all you can do is hope that it's not that serious. And I don't know what the answer is, but yeah, I will be seriously hoping that it's not that serious.
Luke and I still have more to get to, including where we think the College Football Playoff Committee will rank Notre Dame in the top 25 that is going to be released later tonight. But first, a word from our friends at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you will get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. All right, here's my pick. We're looking ahead Thursday Night Football, Green Bay plus 3.5 on the road against the Lions. I understand that the Lions are probably the best team in the NFL right now, certainly the hottest team in the NFL. But you know what? I like Green Bay to cover plus 3.5. I think it's going to be a close game. They might not win, but I think that they will not lose by more than a field goal. So I am taking Green Bay on Thursday Night Football. And for more, just visit FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, that's it for the things that we liked and didn't like from the USC game. Now let's turn our attention to the penultimate CFP rankings. We got another top 25 coming out later tonight. The next week, the last ones that will determine the college football playoff. So how do you think things are going to shake out there in the top 12 this week?
So I think this is the week that Notre Dame jumps Penn State. I do. And I think it is because their win was more impressive at USC than Penn State's was. They never trailed in this game. They ended up winning by 14 points. And I think more importantly, for a committee that is never consistent and always tends to jump teams at the last minute, I think this, by putting Notre Dame ahead of Penn State this week, gives them the power to drop Penn State as far as they want when they presumably get the brakes beaten off them by Oregon this week. So
Wow.
that is why I'm going that way, because then they can drop them down to like the 10 line or something like that and not have to worry about putting them at the 5 seeds, keeping them ahead of Notre Dame for losing the Big Ten championship game.
So you are taking the bait from Vegas. They've got Oregon -3.5. Everyone's shocked at that line. You taking Oregon?
Yeah, I mean, how upset do you think Penn State is they had to play in that game? I think they're furious. They didn't want to have to do anything all year.
They were in a great spot.
Yeah.
Not having to play in that game because they're probably going to get the 5 seed. So I would disagree with you on the notion that they're going to jump them. I think the fact that they are now in the Big Ten Conference Championship, I think that helps them in some weird roundabout way in the eyes of the committee, even though I don't necessarily agree with it. So this is how I think it's going to look when the committee releases the rankings tonight. 1, I've got Oregon. 2, Texas. Big Ten SEC champs there. I think Penn State's going to be 3rd, Notre Dame 4th. Georgia hangs on. They stick at 5, despite the fact that I was really hoping that they would lose to Georgia Tech in one of those million overtimes there. I think they're only going to drop Ohio State to 6, in part because they have that win over Penn State and they have that win over Indiana, 2 top 10 teams. So I got Ohio State 6, Tennessee 7, SMU, the regular season ACC champ, at 8, Indiana 9, 10 I've got Boise State, and then this is where I might surprise some people. I've got Miami at 11. I do not agree with this at all. I thought their loss this last weekend was absolutely an eliminator for them, but then I saw Heather Dinich of ESPN saying, do not count Miami out. The committee really likes them. Nobody is more tuned into this stuff than her. So the fact that she's saying Miami's still in it, I've got them at 11, Alabama at 12, and then in that weird 3-loss SEC team, I got Alabama, Ole Miss, South Carolina, and then Arizona State 15, Big 12 champ. If this holds, Notre Dame would get Miami in the 6-11 game in the first round. You could sign me up for that.
Yeah, that wouldn't be too bad. And I don't necessarily doubt that Miami could get in, but that is ridiculous if they do. That said, if it comes down to them in Alabama, I'm sorry, Alabama. You lost 3 football games. You don't belong in the college football playoff.
But like, what has Miami done too? Even though I know
nothing.
I'm just the one who's
they have done nothing. Now that I think I want to hear less about South Carolina. Like it's actually ridiculous how people just well they're playing better. I'm sorry, their schedule was front loaded and they lost all the good teams. What a shame.
They lost to the 2 teams that they're in competition
exactly.
with.
It's insane that people want to entertain this argument.
I don't get it. I understand that Alabama hasn't looked particularly great lately. I don't really think that they should be in, but I definitely don't think that South Carolina should be the team arguing against them when they lost both those games head-to-head. And I understand that head-to-head can't be the end-all, be-all in college football because the transitive property doesn't always apply and all that stuff. But, like, when you lose 2 to these 2 teams, like, that has to matter.
It should, but I don't know if it does. But I think it will. I think Alabama will get the benefit of the doubt, and they will be in, and Miami will not.
So how do you think things are going to shake out this weekend? Because I think from the Notre Dame rooting perspective, we should want chalk, right? Oregon to win, Texas to win, and that way they get the first 2 spots, and there's not any craziness there. Because what if Penn State wins? You're looking at a potential 1-seed Penn State, depending on what happens with the SEC championship, and that's when things could get weird. Notre Dame could fall all the way down to 7. Like, what are you rooting for this weekend?
I mean, not Penn State. That's not a world I want to live in. And frankly, I've been so sick of Georgia fans this week that I hope they get the brakes kicked off them too. Now, I don't see that happening. I think Texas probably will not win that football game, although who knows? They're favored. But Georgia fans are just and to try to defend that Georgia Tech win where it took 8 overtimes to beat a team that literally didn't have a 2-point play. I don't know what to tell you.
You got any big interest in Clemson, SMU, or Big 12?
The Big 12, no, none at all. I think that is just like neither of those teams belong in the playoff. Frankly, I think SMU does deserve to be in if they win. It is kind of crazy that Clemson has another shot at this thing. I wouldn't mind playing them, I'll tell you that much, especially on a cold night in South Bend, because we saw what happened when they came up on a November night a couple of years ago and got taken out to the woodshed. But I don't know what's going to happen in that ACC game. It is interesting that you have all these teams in these new conferences that were first place in the conference to join this year. So we'll see what happens. But yeah.
I think everyone is going to be waiting to see how the committee treats teams who lose in the conference championship. Because if they penalize them, like if SMU loses and now they have 2 losses and they're out, all of a sudden that sets a precedent where maybe it's better to not make the conference championship.
Right.
And maybe teams start throwing games or they start sitting starters. And then now all of a sudden those conference championship games don't mean anything. And now the conference commissioners and all the television partners, all of that now they are going to be really pissed. I don't think that they can do that for that reason because they have as much of a say in how all of this shakes out as anyone. But it is going to be very interesting to see how they deal with that this weekend.
Now, I think the problem when we talk about precedents in the college football playoff committee is like it's the wrong word because they go against the precedents they set all the time. So I wouldn't put anything past them.
All right, you got any final thoughts on the playoff, Notre Dame USC, before we wrap things up here?
No, just eager to see how this shakes out. Hopefully this team gets healthy over the next couple of weeks and, looking forward to being in South Bend in a couple of weeks.
All right, we'll talk to you again next week with a playoff matchup. We'll know who Notre Dame will be facing off against, and what would it take for you to not make that game?
I don't know. Something probably, honestly.
I can't wait. I cannot wait to be there for that one. It's going to be a lot of fun. Well, we'll talk to you next week.
All right. Sounds good.
All right, that's a wrap for this episode. Tomorrow, make sure you tune in for my reaction to the official CFP rankings. Plus, I'll have plenty of signing day coverage coming your way over the course of these next 2 days because the early signing period actually begins on Wednesday. Right now, I feel like this class is pretty underwhelming overall, but I'm hoping to get another recruiting insider on the show as well to do a deep dive on the class and put everything in perspective. Then later in the week, Friday, we're bringing the Friday mailbag back after a 1-week hiatus. So if you've got questions, send them in. You can submit yours in the YouTube comments, send them in on X at Locked On Irish or on Instagram at Locked On Irish Pod. And please make sure that you are subscribed on YouTube or wherever you're listening to the podcast. Give this video a like if you're watching on YouTube and have not already, or rate the podcast 5 stars and leave a review on your preferred platform. And I will see you tomorrow, same time, same place.